Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Edie Valley Project, linked to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. Originally, this story was only going to be 2 parts, but I quickly realized that if I didn't break it into 3, that this part was going to be 5 times longer than the first one. So I figured I'd break it into 3. So here's the second part. The finale will hopefully be next week. I hope. I pray. We'll see. So without further ado, here is The End for Now, Part 2. Niko landed on cold concrete and grunted from the impact. He hopped to his feet as quickly as he could, raising his arms over his head to get his breath back. Panting as his lungs struggled to fill with air for a minute, he tried not to panic. Wherever he was, it was pitch black. No lights at all. Was her plan to just keep him here until he died? Gradually, he regained the ability to breathe again, and the panic subsided. That's right, nothing good ever came from panicking. First, Niko reached out in front of him, trying to find a wall to orient himself. He took a few stumbling steps forward and nearly bashed into one. Walking around the perimeter of the room, Niko quickly came to the conclusion that he was in a small concrete box, one that didn't have any exits, at least as far as he could tell. This wasn't good. Unless she was pumping air into this box, the remaining amount of oxygen would only last him a few hours. But would she just kill him like that? Doug hadn't seemed to think so. He'd been convinced that she wanted to toy with them first. And if Doug was right, then the best thing to do would be to wait. But did he really trust Doug? No. No, he didn't. Even if he hadn't been like this in the past, all of the encounters Niko had had with him had been unsavory, to say the least. Doug was delusional, deluded, and highly emotional. He could very well have made up everything he knew about Abigail as part of his revenge fantasy. Abigail was vicious. She would do anything to protect herself, and now she was going to kill him. Speaking of the devil,
there's no need to conserve oxygen. Did you honestly think I was just going to kill you?
Shit. I mean, you are a psychopath. He shrugged, unsure if she could actually hear him or not. I don't know what goes on in your head.
Even psychopaths have a method to the madness, twisted though it may be. A pattern. Have you ever seen me just kill someone with no ulterior motive?
Lila, he muttered under his breath. Abigail coughed, and the speaker crackled.
Lila? Who's that?
What do you mean, who's... Niko quickly felt his face turning red.
Oh, do you mean the weeaboo sword girl you like so much? Well, you see, that still fits the pattern because it wasn't about killing her. Oh, no. I wanted to see what you would do after she was murdered in front of you.
Niko's blood turned to ice. What? He whispered.
The way I saw it, there were 2 possibilities. Either you were made stronger and harder by it, and you came back and defeated your sweet sword girl's killer once and for all, or you ran crying back to your daddy and eventually take over the family business just like you were supposed to do all along. I had my bets on the latter, but I'm glad I was wrong. This outcome is much more fascinating.
So, he tried to get his shaking voice under control. That's all her death was? Just a tool to push me?
In death as she was in life.
Abigail's laughter was more muted than usual. You're wrong. He glared up at the ceiling, hoping she could see him. She was so much more than that.
Was she really? Seemed to me like she was a good little puppet. You pulled her strings however you wanted. But I suppose that's how it is with you mob types. Just like your father pulled your strings.
Stop it.
Look!
And at the word, a pale, blue light lit up one of the concrete walls, and what Niko saw almost made him vomit.
I had her body preserved and everything, for old time's sake. Does this remind you of your lives together?
It was her. Or rather, it was her corpse. Her pale skin eerily waxy, her red hair faded and lank. She was suspended from the ceiling, a small hook embedded into each of her arms. Hooked around the metal were strings, almost translucent except for the shimmer from the lights. No, Niko mumbled, shaking his head and backing away.
Is it not picture perfect? Accurate. Only difference is that this time, I'm the puppet master.
Let her go, he growled. Just let her go.
You never did. so why should I?
I never forced her to do anything.
She was your servant.
She was my friend.
Ooh, look, I can make her dance!
Abigail cackled as Lila's limp body flailed about pathetically. And then something happened. Maybe Niko just snapped. Maybe his mind had finally given in to the madness of literally everything around him. Maybe Abigail wasn't pumping any oxygen into the box after all, and he was simply hallucinating. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd been right about Lila all along. Because at that moment, he could have sworn she lifted her head. She stared at him, tears in her milky eyes. "Please, Niko," she said. "Cut me down." Her head fell, and Niko reached for the gun in his belt. Though his hands were shaking, and though Abigail's laughter was splitting his head in two, Niko aimed and squeezed the trigger. Bang! One of her arms fell to her side. Bang! The other string snapped and she fell, just like she had at St. Adelaide's. Abigail's laughter abruptly cut off, and the lights went out. For a moment, Niko was left in darkness. And then the wall exploded. Tommy sat in the darkness, frozen for a long time. He had no idea where the others were, or if they were even alive. How had they just allowed themselves to waltz into this trap so easily? What else had they expected to happen? Abigail to just give in? That wasn't how she worked. No way. No how. It was Doug. He'd just been so utterly confident that Tommy had let him do what he wanted. Oldest trick in the con artist's book. Tommy was getting rusty. This was probably exactly what Doug had wanted, to use them as bait so he could get to Abigail. Stupid. How had he not seen that one coming? After a few minutes of breathing, and after realizing that his eyes were not going to adjust to this pitch blackness, Tommy got to his feet. First step was to get out of here and find Service and the others, if it wasn't already too late. However, it quickly became apparent that he was not going anywhere. The walls were solid, and Tommy's gifts didn't lie in the explosive. At this point, he only had one way out. To talk. "Abigail," he called out. "Abigail Hodge, I know you can see me."
Ah, yes, the oldest Miller spawn. I'd almost forgotten about you. I was going to let you stew for a bit longer, but what the hell?
Immediately, the room lit up, the illumination stemming from the ground. Tommy found himself in a concrete box, the only feature of note the floor, which was a metal grate that gave a revealing view to the water below. It was dark and seemed to be bubbling. "What is all this?" he asked. She didn't answer him.
You should consider yourself lucky. Most of your friends are at this very moment receiving the most devious of psychological torments. But with you, I just want to talk.
"Talk?" he asked, loosening his collar. "Was it a little hot in here or just his nerves? What do you mean?"
Well, I know so little about you compared to your friends, and I haven't had a decent chat with anyone in far too long.
He didn't like this. What was the catch?
Of course, I can't let you off that easily. That's not fair to your friends. So we're going to play a little game. It's called Tell the Truth or Get Boiled Alive. Do you want to know why it's called that?
I have a feeling I already know.
Because of all the little lambs that have wandered into my den today, you are the one I understand the least. And when I don't understand something, oh, you don't know how much it hurts me.
What in the hell was wrong with this chick?
So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them truthfully. If I think you're lying, I pull one little lever and you get dumped into that boiling water below. Make sense?
I take it I don't have a choice to play this game?
Not at all.
Tommy sighed and leaned against the wall. "All right," he said. "I understand."
Good. Now you are quite the mysterious one, aren't you?
Am I supposed to answer that one? Because that seemed kind of subjective to me.
No, that was rhetorical. But it seems you like it that way. In fact, you're so mysterious that you almost just fade into the background. Is that what you want out of life?
Okay. Ouch, he started. And for the moment, yes.
And just how long has that moment lasted?
I don't know, a while.
See, I think the real reason is because that's all you know. All because of when you were a withered child. If anyone paid attention to you then, it was to give you those cigarette burns you've so cleverly hid.
Tommy had no idea what to say to that. How dare this bitch dig around in his brain like that? How dare she assume anything about him or how he acted?
What do you think about that?
I think you have no idea what you're talking about.
Don't I? I was raised in an orphanage, you know. But this isn't about me. If I'm wrong, just tell me so. But remember, this lever's looking awfully easy to push.
He was just about to open his mouth to tell her that she was full of shit but stopped, holding it open. He really didn't draw that much attention to himself, did he? Didn't ever try to make waves. Cowell walked all over him, and Orem tried to do the same. Mike never even seemed to notice his presence, and though Cindy cared about him, she seemed to take him to granted. And he'd only been back a little over 6 months. Was it because he didn't make enough noise? He opened his mouth again. I don't know.
These things take some time to wrap your head around.
Abigail sympathized. What was she, a shrink?
So we'll move on for now, because I'm curious, Tommy. I've looked up all the records, the census data, and housing contracts, and I'm thoroughly stumped. It seems you lived here in Edie Valley for 8 years and then vanished off the face of the earth until 6 months ago. Where were you?
He really didn't want to answer this. He hated talking about himself, but even now it was a little hard to breathe from all the steam coming from the water below. I was living with a fortune teller named Ramus.
Did he kidnap you?
No, never. He knew the situation I was in and offered me a way out, so I took it.
And you just went with him?
Even though you've known him for such a short amount of time?
Yeah, I guess He cut off mid-sentence. Wait a second. I never told you how long I'd known him for.
Well, you caught me.
She giggled.
Truth be told, I already knew all that. I just wanted to hear you talk about it. But there is one thing I still don't understand. Why did you go with him? You were young, I suppose, but very clever. You had to understand the danger.
I did, he nodded. I guess it was because I admired him. He was wise and confident and kind. The first truly kind man I'd ever met. And I guess I just hoped that he really was that person.
And he was, wasn't he? He took you on so many amazing adventures.
Abigail supplied.
Showed you so many things, introduced you to so many people. You even made a few friends. Like Kay.
His gaze shot upwards. How do you know about Kay?
Ooh, hit a sore spot, have I?
Abigail asked.
You did cause her a lot of trouble, didn't you? But you want to know a secret? Oh, but I'm not sure if I should tell you.
What do you know, Abigail?
Your dear old friend is still very much alive.
What? His eyes widened. Where? But before she could say anything more, the wall exploded. Service sat in a box, not really thinking about anything. The floor above had given out on him, and well, he guessed he was here now. He didn't know how long he'd been sitting there when Abigail cleared her throat.
So, are you going to do anything, or?
No. Service shook his head.
Okay, well, I guess I'll just take my leave, then.
He sat there a while longer, and then the wall exploded. Cindy and Marcell landed in a tangled pile at the bottom of the shaft. They lay there for a moment, a little stunned. Cindy, Marcell finally muttered, your elbow is sticking into my chest. Oh, sorry. She scrambled off, but still clung to him. Where are we? I don't know. Even I'm having a little trouble seeing. But it looks like we're in a concrete box. He stood, looking around the room. Cindy, on the other hand, couldn't see anything. She kept her arm firmly around his, for fear that if she let go, she'd lose him entirely. Of all the places that Shu could have taken us, she said in a voice a lot steadier than she felt, that's a little more boring than I expected.
It's not about the aesthetics.
Abigail's voice came from somewhere above them as the lights came on.
It's about the functionality. Besides, you all didn't give me a lot of time to prepare, you know.
Prepare for what? Marcell asked.
Pure psychological torture, of course.
Abigail replied, chuckling to herself.
All of you are getting the best that I have to offer. Tommy's learning a few hard truths, and Niko's having a little reunion right as we speak.
Why are you doing this? Cindy asked. Following that, Marcell frowned. And what can we do to get you to stop?
The second question's easy. Nothing. You want to know why? Because the reason I do it is simply pure curiosity. No more, no less. I'm simply infatuated with the concept of breaking people, seeing what makes them tick. I suppose I could have separated you two. You both got enough damage to take out a tank, but I was running short on time, so together it is.
And just what are you going to do?
Me? Nothing. I'm just going to sit back and...
Just at that moment, another small saw emerged from the wall and nicked Cindy's arm before she could react.
Oopsies!
Abigail cackled.
My hand slipped. I accidentally pressed the button that shoots saws out of the walls. Now, why did I put that there again? Oh well, it's just a little scratch. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Oh wait, it is for you two. Have fun!
Cindy winced in pain, grabbing her arm. It wasn't bad enough that she needed to cauterize it. She didn't want to burn the skin around the cut if she didn't have to, but if she kept bleeding like this. Marcell's eyes roved over the glistening blood. No matter what he did, he couldn't look away. How'd he gotten so weak? Before the cult, he could have handled far more than her blood than this without blinking. But even now, without trying, he could still taste the human blood in his tongue. And the magic that pulsed under her skin was so strong now, it would be ecstasy running down his throat. Lucius, Cindy said, as she saw his pupils dilate. They stared at each other for a minute, before she finally sighed. Just drink it. She held out her arm. As long as you don't kill me, I don't really care. I never have. And I bet after you taste it, it'll lose all its mystique. No, Cindy, I can't do that to you. He shook his head, trying to clear it. You mean you can't do it to yourself? He gazed into her eyes, as if the answers would all be there, and she gazed back. His eyes were filled with ruins, ancient, crumbling history, ancient, crumbling people, and Cindy was afraid that if she looked for too long, she'd become lost in them. Drinking my blood or not is your choice, she said finally. Don't fight against yourself. I'm leaving it in your hands, so don't decide for my sake. You're right, he sighed. This whole time I've been using you as my excuse. He thought for a moment, and much to Cindy's surprise, the redness started to leave his eyes. Tearing off the bottom of one of his sleeves, he wrapped the scrap around her cut, still being very careful not to touch any of it. There, he said. That should keep it from bleeding too much. Cindy admitted that she was a little surprised. She hadn't been certain what he would do. Well, all right then, she grinned. Since Abigail seems to have hopped ship, let's blow this popsicle stand. How do we do that? Marcell asked. Abigail probably sealed this place up tight. There's only one way to find out. Cindy held out her hand, and the wall in front of her exploded.